Hey everybody, welcome back to Average Joe's Overlanding. Today we are going to install some aftermarket control arms. Obviously there's bushings that need to go in here. It comes with the ball joint and the connections for our brake lines and everything. I chose the KSP Performance line. I did this for a couple of reasons. Number one, it had a lifetime warranty on craftsmanship, along with a 1-year warranty on the ball joints and bushings. The bushings are also easily replaceable. You can find them at pretty much any off-road shop. And the ball joints themselves are replaceable, so you don't have to worry about buying a whole new control arm set when you just need to service those parts. They also have grease zerts, so that is something that was important to me to keep stuff serviced and hopefully add to the longevity of it. And lastly, the price point. They were about half the cost of any other control arms on the market. So we will definitely have to see how they hold up in the long run and whether or not that was a good choice. So we're going to be installing these today because when I went from, I had like a 1-inch block in the rear and a 2-inch spacer in the front for a leveling kit on the Tacoma. And when I went to the Icon rear leaf pack, it actually changed that 1-inch block out and added, with the leaf pack in there, it took it to a total of 1.75 inches. So when I purchased the leaf pack, the gentleman at the parts store warned me that there could be a possibility of some steering wandering. And I was like, nope, I'm not experiencing it now. It's only supposed to be like another 3/4 of an inch. It's not a big deal. I don't think it's going to be an issue. Well, it has been an issue, to the point that I drove to the Grand Canyon last weekend, and on the way home, it was kind of dangerous at highway speeds. So something to think about if you are going to be, doing that suspension lift. Think about those components. Wait another week, 2 weeks, whatever it's going to take. Get the extra parts that you're going to need to get it done right, get a proper alignment, because I fought the steering wheel the entire way home. And after hiking 20 miles for the day, I drove up that morning. I drove home. I'd been up for almost 24 hours. It was just a bad situation all the way around. I do not recommend that for anyone. Definitely get a room, pull over, whatever you need to do. Make sure you keep your stuff aligned. It's not only your safety of everybody else on the highway if something else happens. So we're gonna get these installed. I'll get the truck in the air. I gotta throw some jack stands under it, and then we'll move the jack to the one side to where we can reconnect everything once we're done. So I'll get it jacked up, get the tire off. We'll see what we're looking at. All right, so one thing to talk about real quick before we get started is laying everything out ahead of time. So we want to make sure that we have all the correct parts, everything is in the correct places. That way, if you need to make a run for anything, you do know. If you have the type that the bolt goes all the way through, then this will be the correct part number for you. There is one other style where it's actually 2 smaller bolts, one going through each side. So that one, unfortunately, I do not have the part number for you for. But got everything laid out here. These separately are about $30 each. You can go to your local Toyota dealership. They can get you connected with those. If you know somebody that gets them at a wholesale cost or anything like that, I would highly recommend going through that, because they are quite a bit cheaper if you can get that kind of connection on it. So now let's get it in the air. We'll get these pre-assembled and get everything ready to go. All right, so we've got the truck up on jack stands here. You can see core support, nice place to put it. And I've got the jack now moved under the control arm on the lower side. Notice I didn't put it on that ball joint piece that could have sat right there. That was done intentionally so that once I get this upper ball joint disconnected on the upper control arm, I can actually check that lower ball joint and see what's going on with it. So we're gonna get in here. As we can see, here is that long bolt. Starts here, comes all the way across the back side there, out this side. Now, The reason you have to get new ones is because in order to get this bolt out on both sides, you either have to bend this pinch seam here and bend it back so far to be able to slide that past it, or you can cut this bolt off, slide it out this way, and then when you put your new one in, you just put it in this way. I don't want to have to bend that pinch weld there, so I'm just going to replace it and do it this way anyways. This bolt here is the one that replaces with the stud on the other one, so you can see with your brake line coming down there, and it'll hold it. So we're gonna get all this taken apart. Don't need to mess with this, so we'll pop this pin, break this one loose. We're just gonna take it loose so that we can knock this little tapered pinch out of here, pop this off, and then we'll take these loose and get everything ready to come out of there. All right, so we've got this opened up a little bit more. Got the splash guards off on both sides. We got our ball joint loose here, control arm, or excuse me, knuckle here kind of leaned off out of the way. We ended up taking this bolt out here as well as the one over here, which now that this is loose, I don't think that was actually needed, but I wanted to make sure that there was plenty of slack in this cable for the ABS line, that we didn't have to worry about pinching that at all. This bolt, what I've done, because we have to cut it right here, I don't want it trying to walk in and out of there. So there was a hole right here. I took advantage of it. I just zip tied it kind of tight to that side. We'll see if this works. If that doesn't, then we'll have to figure something else out. I took my welding jacket and just kind of stuffed it up in here. There's a wiring harness right here. There's all kinds of stuff right on the other side of that in your engine bay. I don't want to throw sparks all over any of that, risk any fire, melting anything. So we're gonna try it just like this and see how that works. All right, so now that we've got the new one pre-assembled, you can see that the angles kind of match with the ball joint sitting off to the side. What you can pay attention to is this hole where the ABS line bolts into matches this stud that we have. It still has a protective cover on it, but there's a nut under there that these little nuts and washers go to there. One thing to take note of, I was talking about the bump steer. You can see this is kind of stiff, but it's shot, this upper control arm. Now my truck has 23,000 miles on it. There's no reason for this upper control arm ball joint to be like this. This is strictly from what has happened with the lift and the lack of adjustment in the caster and the damage that's done to it. So that's why it's important to get the aftermarket control arms whenever you're doing stuff like this, because that is designed with different geometry to allow that to not break down and wear out quite as fast. All right, so we've got the new control arm in, and what I can tell you is these two bolts up here, they're 10 millimeter. These definitely need to come out. What that is it's a bracket that allows this whole set to come through. You'll see in the time lapse that you should have just watched where I was struggling with it. I finally took those out and allowed me to push these over far enough to get that long bolt at the correct angle and sideways that I needed to get it through. One thing to take note of as you're installing it, make sure that you put these washers. So one here, one here, come over the other side, one here, before your nut. And then, like I said, Here's our ABS line here. It is a good idea that you remove the other end from over here, this nut and this clip, because as you can see, with it just barely tightened in right now, we can't even get it back down in there. So we've got everything just kind of snugged in right now. I'm gonna start tightening this up first. Once I get this up, then we can get this tightened back down. We'll get the wheel back on, and then we'll set it down before we torque these. Now these are to be torqued to, I believe it says 65 to 75 on these and 100 on this one here. So, but you want to make sure that you torque it in the loaded suspension position. That way it's in the proper place while it's being torqued into position. So we'll get all that done and then we'll come back, move to the other side. All right, just returned from the test drive and after installing the new KSP Performance upper control arms. World of difference. I'll throw in a little clip here of driving. And you can see hopefully just the difference. If you pay attention to the steering wheel in the clip from before, you'll see that I'm kind of fighting the steering wheel constantly, and then in the after clip it's pretty smooth. I still do need an alignment. That was something I knew beforehand. Overall, pretty simple install. I mean, even cutting the old bolts wasn't complicated. Pretty straightforward. I don't think that you would need a lot of skills by any means in order to complete this task. You basically need a 19 millimeter wrench, a 10 millimeter wrench or socket, a hammer, and then the aftermarket bolts on it is a 22 millimeter on the upper control arm, on the upper ball joint bolt. The replacement one did come with a 22 millimeter nut on it, so you may need a 22, or depending on what brand you go with, it may have a different size. Double check that before you start. But all in all, not very complicated at all. Definitely recommend doing it when you do any other suspension upgrades with the lift. So thanks for watching. You can find me on Instagram at suits_2_sunsets. That's TO. Like, subscribe, comment down below.